For the next session, we're going to also look at what goes into those infrastructure plans and what are the aspects that would weigh and should weigh into those infrastructure plans that would finally go afterwards into recovery and into bigger economic growth, of course. And what I mean with that is that for the next plenary session, we are going to look at smart technology and how is it set to reshape the infrastructure challenges, of course, in the post-crisis times. And for this next session, for the next plenary session, I'm inviting the moderator, Pierre-Emmanuel Houllier, Managing Director, Head of Technology, EMEA, HSBC France. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello, and thank you for hosting us. So indeed, we are talking about smart technologies and the way it's going to reshape infrastructure. Since you have more and more cross-fertilization actually between technology assets and infrastructure assets, and in fact, you will see that one of our panelists is operating an infrastructure which is digital by nature. So I'm welcome on stage first Laurent Fayolas, who is Deputy Head of Infrastructure at Ardian. Gilles Grappinet, who is the Chairman and CEO of Worldline. Alexis Aujabre, who is a partner at White & Case. And finally, Vincent Levita, who is the founder and CEO of Infravia. So we're going to start with a few questions, and I will encourage maybe in the first question our panelists to say a few words about the institution they represent. And I will start by Vincent, if that's okay. Vincent, you are invested in a number of infrastructure assets across Europe, and you are observing more and more a dichotomy between assets and infrastructure operators and services operator. How is technology playing on this dichotomy?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. I think if we look back a little bit, telecommunication operators, we will see that back in the days they were fully integrated, so service, operation, and infrastructure, and progressively they managed to carve out or to sell down on the infrastructure assets. So many reasons can explain that. The first reason was during the expansion period, it was critical for them to have a full control of the infrastructure. It was for them the best way to get a competitive edge. And progressively, it was less and less necessary for several reasons. If I may, the first reason is probably when the market is more mature, getting a competitive edge through your infrastructure is less necessary. The second reason is more pragmatic. Actually, these guys need more and more capex to expand, and so they need some support on their balance sheet. And then, of course, there is a third reason, which is more logical. If you need 3 or 4 operators in a country to get a good competition, you don't certainly need 3 or 4 telecom towers network or 3 or 4 fiber network to go through the country. So we have seen this carve-out move in different countries, and now it's happening in France. Maybe Orange is going to do it. So it's probably a sign that it's really mature. The technology was critical there to get the infrastructure players ready to operate as a transversal, versatile network, and that was also a good way to expand on the fiber network, and of course to give more financial flexibility to the operators.
Maybe I will continue with Laurent. Laurent, you are similarly invested in a number of infrastructure assets across Europe, and you are working hard actually to transform them into new usages and embedding more and more technology. Can you highlight for us a few opportunities and challenges you are seeing in the reshaping infrastructure?
Thank you, Pierre-Emmanuel. Yes, so I mean, just as a very short introduction, as you were asking for, just to position Ardian Infrastructure. So today we're managing 15 billion euros, and we got two main funds. One is dedicated for Europe, and the current size is 6.2 billion euros. And another one for Americas, OECD countries, same strategy for the investment, with a size of a bit less than $800 million. So just in a few words. You were mentioning digital. It's something which for us is very important today. And we're really asking ourselves, looking at assets, let's say, is it resilient on the long term? So I think we got some questions which are, I would say, critical from the time of the investment. And then the other question would be, how can I improve the assets over time? First question is, I would say, very critical, because it could lead to a decision not to invest in a company. Just taking an example on the wholesale, for example, could you see things like Airbnb? So you'll get the business, you'll get the asset, but you may get someone in between you and your customer. I mean, capturing, in a sense, all the value of your assets. So that's really a critical question for us. And we decided to set up a team of 3 people within the infra business who are looking transversely at all assets and asking some questions. In a few words, do we get assets which are intelligent enough, open enough, prolific enough, resilient enough, and impactful enough to stay on the long run and to benefit from the current market? And I think this is extremely interesting because, again, it doesn't change completely your asset. It's just a way to improve, I would say, revenues, maybe improve or enhance the way you are operating your business. To take one example, for example, in Portugal, we designed with some a university a digital twin of our network, motorway network. And now we get, I mean, information with sensor all around the motorways to give us, I mean, information, data that could help maybe to anticipate maintenance, that could help, for example, on security, that could help in the flows management. So again, it's something for us which is quite interesting, but also which for us give us a view on the long term of all the assets.
And you have both spoken about improvement in operations, but would you say that there are new business models which are being developed on your respective infrastructures, both Vincent and Laurent?
Well, for us, we have invested at Infravia in the telecom space since 2012. The first interest for us was there is growth. So we took a view that in the future we will need more and more telecom capacities, telecom infrastructures, and transportation. Of course, we will need airport probably and roads, but certainly more telecom fibers and data centers. So we took this view, and the first move for us was let's invest in the infrastructure that will be necessary tomorrow. And that means growing, expanding, and developing the asset. And then, of course, once we have done that, when we've got the full pipes and the capacity and the real infrastructure, we can improve the existing business model. So we have invested in smart meters, so that also is a way to use technology to improve water consumption, energy consumption. We are invested in an airport that used to be very, very successful a few weeks ago, but still you can improve traffic and you can improve operation thanks to technology. On the healthcare as well, we have invested in nursing home and hospital. You can improve the way you manage your client or your patients and as well your cost base through technology. So the usage of technology in terms of optimizing the asset base is certainly a good way. But first move for us was let's invest in the capacity, let's invest in the infrastructures that will be necessary tomorrow.
Very clear. Maybe Alexis, as a neutral observer, I would say, of the French infrastructure market, it would be interesting to have your views on how the French market is efficient and sustainable. And since White & Case is present across the whole of Europe, how would you benchmark the French market and its infrastructure, which Vincent has just described, so critical, versus other markets?
Thank you very much. I heard during one of the first sessions somebody saying we need to be successful. I heard that. So I think that we have one example that we can share here where the French market and overall France has been more than successful. We have to be proud of that. It's a consensus, I think, around this table. It's a fiber network in France. Nowadays, France is ranked first in the deployment of the fiber in Europe. And in terms of the new subscribers, we have nearly 2 million new subscribers and a total 15 homes which are equipped. This is a quite interesting situation where at the same time in France you have the most, I would say, heavy regulations that apply to that type of asset. It's délégation de service public, concessions, AMEL, affermage, which is, for those who are familiar with those type of assets, highly regulated, whereby in the UK or in Germany you don't have that type of regulation. So what is the reason of this success story? I think there's three criteria. First and foremost, it has been driven at the very first time by the involvement of the French state. We have to be proud of that. It started around 2013, where the national plan France Très Haut Débit enabled the injection of 20 billion euros to the market. There's, I would say, one dark side in the picture, which is that we have less still deployment in the rural areas, but that is, however, to be treated again. And in 2019, the government has injected more than 250 million euros for those regions. So this is the first element. And the second ingredient is then the involvement of the private investment. At the very beginning it was, and my friends and colleagues here will have more to say about that, it was really, I would say, basic greenfield funds at the level of every DSP concessions. And now we have one of the most, I would say, sophisticated investment in this area. You have now investment directly in form of debt or equity in the infrastructure, but you have very sophisticated schemes where investors are just investing in the right of use. It's the indefeasible right of use. You have one very interesting article in this leaflet, article number 5, and we can have tomorrow other type of investment, just not only on the asset, not only on the right of use, but maybe just the connections. So we have, I think, we have started from the greenfield investment, and now we have one of the most sophisticated investment in this sector. And third element is that's where it becomes really interesting. It is win-win success story when the market is now, I would say, mature. The French state has a plan of the divestiture where through the Banque des Territoires and Caisse des Dépôts, the French state will start to sell its investment and to fuel other sectors, where at the same time the taxpayer has get a proper return. So I would say this win-win formula maybe at some point could be an example for other sectors. It is not the main purpose of this meeting, but the railway is the next to come.
We won't talk about railways, but we're going to talk about payments now. And Gilles, we represent a different kind of infrastructure. So first of all, I think it would be great if you could describe what is the infrastructure behind payments and how payments is related to infrastructure. And then we have talked before on how sectors are consolidating and investors are integrating infrastructure to make them more efficient. I would be very curious to have your views as well on how it works in the industry that you represent.
Yes, indeed. Many thanks, Pierre-Emmanuel. Well, by the way, good morning, everyone. So I am the CEO of Worldline. Worldline is not a well-known company, but it is listed in France. It is now part of the French main index, the CAC 40. We listed the company in 2014 to execute a vision which is pretty simple, which is to create the largest pan-European digital payment infrastructure in Europe. So that is our mission statement, and it has been driven relatively efficiently so far. We've been multiplying the size of the company by 5. Our current news flow, maybe you heard about it, is that we are, in a few weeks' time, about to close our largest acquisition ever, which is the acquisition of Ingenico, one of our sister company in France, executing more or less the same vision than ourselves in other part of Europe. So digital payments is not always well known, and digital payment is quite an interesting industry. If I want to make it really 30 seconds, these are truly, genuinely digital payment infrastructures by design. Like an iceberg, there is the things you see and you touch and you manipulate yourself as payers, the payment terminals, the cash withdrawal machines, but think also about the zillions of internet payment pages, which are actually operated by us on behalf of the merchants and the websites. And of course, this is the visible part. As always, or very often with infrastructure-related activities, the most important part are the things you do not see and you do not manipulate. The very intelligent gateways doing the switching and the routing of the transactions across Europe. There are the highly sophisticated business software analyzing each and every transaction to authorize it or not. The highly powerful encrypted messaging networks, making sure that your transactions are actually circulating all across Europe securely. And of course, very powerful data centers, ensuring an efficient operation of all these layers. So this is the business in which we are. Interestingly enough, this industry in Europe is born very, very, very recently only. It is, of course, linked to our monetary history. Not so long ago, we were having different currencies in many countries, and in each and every country, we were having small, local digital payment infrastructures. And fundamentally, since we created the euro, we created a fantastic opportunity to scale the business, because fundamentally, the euro is level playing field in digital payments. Your credit transfer between an Italian bank account and a Spanish bank account are exactly following the same rules, same formats, same protocols. It has been fully standardized. So it's what we do. We are creating a large digital payment infrastructure, and we enjoy so far a very solid support from the financial markets to do so, because they've been educated by other type of infrastructure-related activities, and they see the value of doing this in this one. Except that in this one, we are not only operating the tubes, we also take care of the end users. We are all at the same time creating our own larger tubes with plenty of efficiency and plenty of scale benefits, but we are also delivering the end services to the end users, the banks or the merchants. So this is there that the magic happens. It is a very interesting business model. And I must say that so far, in 6 years' time, I cannot complain of the level of understanding and support, both from the equity market, because Ingenico transaction is a very good example. It is a transaction that we are paying more than 80% in shares of Worldline, newly issued to allow this consolidation to take place. But also the bond market have been also pretty supportive to our story. So last comment I would like to do at this stage is that, of course, we will pursue executing this vision because we are still small. Whatever fast have been our development so far, we are still having only between 10 to 20% market share, depending on the types of payments we operate across Europe. And our largest competitors are US firms, which have started this journey much sooner than us because they have the dollar since they exist, while we have the euro only for the last 15 years. And we have a catch-up to do in Europe. I believe it is also important for the independence of Europe, and it's why This is a mission that is at the boundary between actual value creation for shareholders, but also we believe we bring something strong to the European independence to have large payment operators that are progressively acquiring from banks that are divesting these payments businesses, because most of them are local within the bank communities, to allow this vision to take place. My last comment would be around smart technologies. By design, my business is all about smart technologies. So, but it has been nonetheless a very powerful enabler of the execution of the vision, because of course, we could not operate dozens of billions of transactions if the technology could not allow us to process in one central point such huge volumes with efficiency and security. So you can also look at a company like Worldline and our colleagues in this industry as highly sophisticated digital companies needing to master all the latest technologies to process massive flows at the relevant scale and with the relevant security. And as we are in Europe, a very strong attention to GDPR and privacy, of course. So this is, I think, for what I wanted to share with you at this stage.
And on your last point, Gilles, did you have the opportunity to work with infrastructure operators to develop your systems, or is something you have developed totally in-house for the time?
No, as a matter of fact, we are enjoying the work done by other infrastructure operators. Of course, for me, it is very important that the telco industry pursue getting more efficient, because ultimately I am using, of course, many important communication layers that are provided to us as a large user by the telco operators. And of course, personally, I encourage further consolidation in my adjacent infrastructure providers, because I know that I can get more scale, better pricing conditions, more security, more investment, and more innovation from their side. So I have a genuine interest to see them pursuing their own consolidation, of course.
Now, Laurent, maybe bouncing back on all those digital deployments that Gilles has described in payments. I know you have recently developed a number of technologies or invested in a number of technologies to enhance infrastructure. Can you share maybe with us a few concrete examples of what you have done and how you are enhancing infrastructure in which you are invested?
Yes, sure. So maybe first investment is something we decided to invest in a small French startup called Wintix. And I think this move is quite interesting, because it's a company who is doing with artificial intelligence, is retrieving statistic and info from cameras online, real time. And we thought it would be extremely useful for example, our transportation asset. With that kind of, let's say, real-time information, you can definitely, for example, play on classification for the toll. You can count the number of vehicles. You can play with flows, decided how to manage the flows. You can also, have a supervision in case of incidents. So all those, let's say, real-time information got a very strong value for us, and we decided, because we got a lot of, let's say, investment in those sectors, airports in Italy, roads in Italy, in Portugal, for example, to get and to work with that company, also to share the knowledge. They were willing to get some information from us, but for us it was also to design things together and to understand also their business. So on this one we decided to invest. We got another example we are putting in place today on renewable, which is also quite interesting. With two software, one is called Greenbyte, the other one is Pexapark. Greenbyte, in fact, help us to get operational data on all our investments on renewable over the world. We got today a bit more than 3.3 gigawatts. So it's really a way to create a global platform. And we got, for example, one person, a data scientist, looking at what we could get from all those information. it's also something which is very interesting because you have to acculturate also the management team you're working with, because that information coming up as a global platform, but it's also information that local management could use. We got something which is anonymized, and they could do their own benchmark, for example. Very useful to see what is the, let's say, time of operation of the various platforms. But I think what is also very interesting, and that's what the objective of the platform, is to add some, let's say, information on market, like price of PPAs, market price, and also, I would say, think a way to also enter long-term new markets. What we're seeing on the market today, for example, if you look at Nordics is really moving to a market risk market, so much less PPAs. It's a bit the same tendency when you're moving to US, where on top of this, I think American people are even more sophisticated because you get forwards to hedge your electricity price, for example. So having a view not only on each wind farm or each solar park, but having something saying, okay, where is my overall risk in terms of, for example, price? It's, I think, quite interesting. It's also a way to anticipate the way we like to hedge. So shall we add, we recently did it on the Nordics PPAs with Google, for example. On the US, we decided to take some hedging, so to take some option to hedge the pricing, and having this, I would say, global positioning all over the world is really a plus. So it's not only, I would say, to improve, it helps a lot to improve the operation of the asset. It's sometimes to help entering new markets and ways of seeing those new markets on the long run.
And would you say, Laurent, that those innovations come more from the infrastructure operators who propose it to their clients, or is there also a demand, I would say, from the local authorities, for example, for such technological deployments? Maybe some of it is deployed because you are requested to deploy them, actually?
So in fact, I think it's both. And what we like also to create, and it's not only with the, I would say, grantors, is a kind of ecosystem where we could propose things to, better operate, making sure that security is even done in such a way that it's even more accurate. And I think today what we're doing a lot is, I would say, session with all our managers, for example, bringing some startups, bringing ideas, exchanging between the various management team. And again, that creates a kind of, let's say, I would say, movement from everyone. It's very interesting to see people when you're putting in place some software, for example, in Portugal, to see that Italian people are pushing to get exactly the same, I would say, module and experience. So again, you need to be, I would say, quite proactive and start things and see from what you're doing what you can create. I think it's also sometimes, I would say, maybe with some, let's say, maybe grantors or regulation, maybe we need a bit of more flexibility. For example, we were thinking at how can we manage to get a different tariff for carpooling, for example, or car sharing. Would it be the same with electrical car or tomorrow, don't know, hydrogen car? Could I push for something which has, I would say, a CO2 impact and reflect that in the price? I would say today it's difficult because regulation is, quite fixed. But again, we would love to have that kind of discussion and to open ways of thinking.
Now, Gilles, what Laurent just described in terms of analytics, cybersecurity, new business models, there were a few other ideas, it's what you do every day, right? Sure. As well in payments. How there's a burgeoning of new payment means, there's a burgeoning of new business model, which is a great news for you because you need to install new payment solutions. But how do you cope with that? And how do you participate to all this innovation?
Well, I was listening very carefully to Laurent's points, and I can only concur. In the payment world, I mean, you understood that we've been moving from a very stable industry, which was nationwide to a pan-European wide. And of course, we have been moving from a very stable payment concept, which was the card in digital payment. The card has been around for the last 30 years, roughly, to a burgeoning of innovation indeed. Form factors, contactless payments, online payments, in-app payments, payment directly from machines that are paying on your behalf. I think of when you go through an highway where you have a beeper that is just telling the infrastructure that you are just paying for what you do. This we call payment from machine. So this is, of course, in terms of form factors exploding. It is also exploding from a payment brands standpoint. I mean, Google Pay, Amazon Pay, Alipay, WeChat Pay, name them. I mean, it has been a constant invention of payment brands that need to find their ways through the infrastructures to the end users, both on the card or the payer side and on the merchant side, the payee side. And there we play a very important role because as we scale the infrastructure on a pan-European basis, we can ease the market access of all these innovators. If not, they would need to knock at dozens of doors, hoping that the local guys with a small scale would actually do the effort to implement their solution on their point of sale or on the local banks, while we can do it in one go. And this is, of course, there that we are, to a certain extent, nurturing. It is a true win-win model. I can accelerate the go-to-market of relevant innovations, and then the relevance of the innovation will be market-tested. Not every good idea is sometimes a market success, but at least I can accelerate the go-to-market. And in return, if it has really a value, it will accelerate the displacement of cash. Because ultimately, I said that my mission is to consolidate infrastructure for making digital payments a pan-European reality. But my ultimate mission is not this one, is actually to accelerate the displacement of cash, to create less cash-intensive economies, because still cash is the most important payment methods by far used in retail payments in Europe. You are maybe not aware of it, but before the COVID, circa 70% of retail payments in numbers were done in Europe in cash or checks or outdated payment methods, which are hugely carbon intensive, not even talking about the necessity to recycle special inks and banknotes and so on. So this is for me a real mission in the mission, which is to find any innovation that is relevant and that we can implement at scale, easing for the fintechs, the startups, sometimes the big techs, as I mentioned a few, to accelerate their go-to-market and accelerate the displacement of cash. I don't dream of a cashless society. It will probably not happen in my lifespan. But I dream of a much less cash-intensive world because it is good for the planet, because not only we talk about carbon emission here, and by the way, Worldline is carbon neutral, so when you contract with me, if you have one day digital payment needs, you can be sure that I will not add 1 gram in your balance sheet for CO2 emission. We are fully certified carbon neutral for whatever we do. But my point is not this one. My point is all the other societal benefits of moving the cash out of the equation of payments. Talk about money laundering, talk about black market, talk about tax evasion, talk about security in the merchants. Maybe you are not aware, but in the US only, which is more advanced than Europe in terms of electronic adoption, there were something like 8,000 bank robberies per year 15 years ago. It has dropped down to below 2,000 per year, just because there is no more cash in bank branches. So, and same for merchants, of course. Just cash kills. There are people dying because of cash. And so for me, all these innovations have to have a purpose and a meaning in life. Innovation per se is not the point. What innovation is good at, and how the infrastructure in digital payment can support the relevant speed of implementation of innovation. This is there that we want to bring something to our industry and hopefully through the industry to our societies.
So Gilles and Laurent, you are in a way investing in creating a more integrated market in Europe, which is one of the strengths of US and China, probably to have a big in-country market. Maybe, Vincent, you want to give us also some examples, because since you have created your technology fund and you are consolidating a number of infrastructures. So I'm curious to hear you as well in terms of infrastructure you pick, why they are winners, and how you embed technologies so that you enhance actually their success with this technology fund or by your own genius.
Yeah, maybe one preliminary comment. What is interesting in this smart technology approach, and you don't need to put smart in front of your smart building or smart cities or smart whatever to be really smart. But what is interesting is if we follow the big trend that we are following at Infravia, is the first one is of course the digitalization of the economy. The second one is certainly energy transition, and the third one would be what we call social infrastructure, which is basically creating more social inclusion thanks to infrastructure that can be healthcare or education, but that also applies to energy and transportation. What is interesting with technology is you create a convergence between all these trends, and I said before, thanks to technology, we can create smart meters, so more able to realize energy saving. Tomorrow, maybe thanks to storage, we will have a distributed economy. I was talking about hospital. I'm talking also about local transportation. And so that's extremely interesting to see that thanks to technology, all these objectives, and we end up that we don't know at the end if it's a transportation, an energy, or a social infrastructure investment, when you can create all this convergence. The second preliminary comment I want to make is the role of the state, basically. So we had, and Alexis said it, in telecommunication, a very interesting stimulus pushed by the public level, and it was not perfect, it was bumpy, but at the end of the day, we've got probably in Europe the most developed high-speed internet network, fiber network, compared to our friends in Germany or in England, for example. This proves that when we play it well between the public level, the industrial level, and the financial players, we can create something good. Now, going to your question, what was realized is by investors, and by the public authorities, is we have been able in France to create a very good startup ecosystem, so what usually called the startup nation, and that worked quite well. But what we also realized is there is a lack of transformation in these startups into real autonomous developed company, and several reasons. Some are cultural, some are financial, and some of them are technological, of course. But there is a lack of financing between a startup and a mature company, and that was called growth. So we decided to invest in this segment to help the system to fill the gap, to bridge the system between startup and autonomous company or cash-generating companies. That's what we call growth or scale up, which is probably more easy to picture. And of course, we can apply that in our own system, which is taking startup in the healthcare sector. I was mentioning numerous applications that help hospitals to deliver a more secure diagnosis, a more at-home diagnosis, so it's faster, it's cheaper, it's most efficient, and you can give access to more people to the best of the art medicine. Of course, energy as well, and Laurent took a numerous example in the transportation industry. So what is interesting with this fund is we have the opportunity for institutional investors to invest in the tech side, which is something I think you cannot miss, but without taking the early stage risk, and with applying this technology in the B2B system, in the infrastructure players, which are extremely resilient, as we said before, and complying at the same time with the social inclusion objective and energy transition objective. So you've got almost the best of every world in this investment approach. I think, well, I'm not sure today we are able to consolidate and integrate everything, but at least we can push the system one step further to include in this traditional investment, which was when I started the infrastructure 15 years ago, we said it's really safe, there is no technological risk, there is no demand risk, there is no risk basically. And of course, technology did not ask our opinion, and the technology stepped in infrastructure business, so we have to deal with it, and that's not only a risk, but that's an opportunity to do more.
And maybe to bounce back on one of Gilles' points, and it's one of the questions from the room, aside of innovation, how do you embed sustainability in your investments? Is it only about renewable energy, or is there something more?
No, I mean, the sustainability, of course, is today we are, at Infravia, we are using the SDG framework. I think it's much more sophisticated than what we did 10 years ago with, ESG KPI and renewable megawatt and stuff. So that was good. Today, what is important for us is when you invest in infrastructure, you are completely consistent with a global approach in the SDG. So that covers climate and energy, that covers social inclusion, that covers as well public level policies and many others. So what we took a view that for us the question was not to gather KPIs, was to define where can we get an impact, basically. And so we cannot have an impact on everything and all the time, but we can have an impact on several aspects and depending on the investment. But when we can, we have to do it. We take the objective. We put our portfolio companies on board. We give them objective. We take ourselves this objective to improve the system, and that can be on climate change, energy transition, also social inclusion. I was saying that, and as well. I mean, there are 17 SDGs. We can contribute to all of them, and that's the beauty of infrastructure. We can create jobs that cannot be delocalized, and we can also participate to the strengths of the territories.
Could I say just one thing? I think what we can do is with tech, for example, we did it on the airport side, is really sometimes to measure things. And when it comes to measure, for example, CO2, I think this is very smart. We develop an app, and we work with a university on this one also, just to get a view, real time, what is the CO2 emission on one airport. And we put it in place, for example, in Italy. But what is extremely important is it's really the starting point. It's not like you're doing things, it's just like you're measuring things, and from that point of time, you can start doing things, or at least envisage. I think the app was not only measuring the CO2 within the airport, but also the way to connect the airport, to get out of the airport. So all, I would say, transfers, and then you can start based on this to think way of improving. One thing which I think is also interesting, it's very linked to CO2, and I think Gilles mentioned it, is when he mentioned I'm carbon neutral. Sometimes also we are having discussion, so it's all about business also, where people say, okay, I've seen that you get a huge park of renewables. What can we do with that? Why? For example, on data centers, people were saying, okay, very happy to discuss with you way of developing the business and making investments. But what I need from you guys also is a way to use your energy. I want to be carbon neutral, or I want to be carbon zero. And again, I think all those tools will definitely help. So, but it's not only for improving, it could be also to make investment and find ways to develop business with other partners.
Which is just bouncing back on that point of Laurent, which is a big problem for us, because as a customer buying energy from energy providers, we are just short in many countries in Europe of renewable supply. We are just pressuring in our tenders all the energy vendors to tell them, guys, we just want just direct renewable energy. And in many countries, unfortunately, they just cannot supply it. So we need to go to carbon offsetting program to compensate for the traditional carbon-based electricity I need for my DCs, which is, of course, for me, probably a market trend. There is a need for much more renewable energy, and I am ready to pay the right price for that. It has a value for me.
Thank you. Maybe my last question to Alexis, because all we have discussed raised the points on data gathering and management. There have been a number of examples from the three other panelists in the last minutes. How do we cope with all that, and how do we make sure that smart infrastructure does not open a big problem with data?
I mean, what you all said, around data, it's scary, right? It's about data, about who, about what, it's about you and I. So basically, data gathering means that, and it's the criteria of intelligence. Smart, why it is smart? Because it has information on all of us, and it can react accordingly. So you have this GDPR concern. We have the framework, so the regulation already exists, but there's also one other set of regulation which basically could at certain point add a second layer of security and guarantee of rights, and what is basically to be considered as a sensitive asset. Tomorrow with the 5G, you're going to have more data, you're going to have more information, because 5G will need this information to be efficient. So here the question is really to what extent we can consider the 5G network tomorrow to be a sensitive asset, what that means. If some asset is considered to be a sensitive asset as regards the regulation under the Code monétaire et financier, it means that the Ministry of Economy and Finance has the right to block and to control the transaction, the investment. So far, the definition, I'm just reading definition, sorry to be boring, it will be sensitive if it concerns the integrity, security, continuity of the operations of electronic communication service networks. I'm just wondering if the 5G will be embedded in this definition, question mark. As of today, that is interesting, the FTTH fiber asset has not been considered by the ministry to be a sensitive asset. It is a question mark, so tomorrow maybe we have to think about those regulations again.
Thank you. So we have a little bit less than 4 minutes left. I don't know if there are questions from the room. No questions. I can see we are going to save 3 minutes for the whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the moderator. Thanks so much for the speakers for this session. Thank you.